Google Pixel 5's chipset may be barely better than the Pixel 4a. The Google Pixel 5 is expected to be Google's top-end smartphone this year, but it seems it might not have the processing power of other premium smartphones. In fact, it could only be a small step above the recently launched budget Google Pixel 4a. The news comes from a leaked Pixel benchmark discovered by MyFixGuide, this published on TechRadar, which lists the phone as having the Snapdragon 765G chipset. Google has been releasing premium smartphones with premium price tags and 800 series Snapdragon chipsets for a while now. Mm-hmm. Last year, I believe, was probably the most expensive they've done. This year is a different story. It has been a different story. We had this huge delay with the 4A. You're looking at the prices. Yeah, it was expensive. We saw what happened with the 4A. We see what's happening global landscape, Android, smartphones in general. Interest in more affordability, interest in more value for money. This could be anything. What we're reading here could be anything. But I'm going to just say something. I don't mind it.
Go ahead.
That was well timed.
Yeah.
I don't mind it. If you don't mind, I don't mind.
Like a lower budget phone?
You know what? I meant it more like this.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I don't mind.
Oh, right.
You see how I meant that?
That?
Yeah, I put it there. I put it in there. I want to see what you did with that. If you don't mind, I don't mind. A 765G in their flagship, so it's going to be a bit bigger. Maybe 5G. 765G, a little bit more powerful than the 4A. Mm-hmm. Presumably major cost savings. That's the key.
Yes.
You get that price right, I think people can look past not having the flagship chip, and it just gets my wheels turning about what people actually want. I'm truly curious about what people actually want. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to have an honest moment here. In this world, in the business we're in, you get to use whatever smartphone you want. You just reach, and then there's a smartphone. It messes you up with your evaluation of what actually matters to a smartphone buyer because you're used to, you bounce around. And anybody in this game should be saying that because it's true. And we come in here and kind of contrast everything against flagship phones because it's what we mostly use. Mm-hmm. And sure, every so often there will be like a 2-week experiment where you use the cheaper device and get a sense for it. But mostly it's the high end, year round, something close to it. And so there's an immediate feeling of, oh, why would you do that, Google? I want to use this phone and I now have to put it up against some 800 series device. It could be this 8 Pro, it could be the Samsung, the new Note, it could be, well, it could just be an S20.
Yes.
And you're going to sit there and say, well, I want the faster processor. I can't use it now because that's going to be a hard justification.
Yeah. It kind of messes with your head.
Yeah, mess with your head.
Knowing that it's not top of the line specs, barely going to use it.
Especially when the top of the line specs are just sitting there, which makes us weird. Right. Yeah. It makes us weird and in some ways, honest moment, not the right person to tell you what the value is. Mm-hmm. Even though we get our hands on everything, it's really more important what's in our pockets. And it's a regular citizen. I'm not saying we're not regular citizens, but I mean a person who doesn't live in this space or do this for work, make and publish videos about all these phones, is going to pick the phone, then have it in their pocket, and then whether they like it or not is not going to constantly be contrasted against the top tier thing that's sitting also on their shelf.
Right. There's a conscious decision in what they actually purchase, right? And actually use. Instead of just having like an array of phones and then just picking like
exactly. And
just
it's this it's a thing where when you see two things side by side, you say, "Oh, mine is trash." But in isolation, it does everything you want, and it's easier for you to notice what it actually does and doesn't do for you in isolation without access to the other devices.
Yes.
So the real review that nobody is capable of doing in this game because of how it's set up, the real review is use the thing for a year in the absence of any other devices and then come back to me a year later and let me know how that went. Who can do that?
Mm-hmm.
You can't publish videos. You can't have a business. So you'll see people, they go back and do some sort of a re-review. They'll be like, it's 3 months now. But it still doesn't matter because they got all these other phones staring in their face.
Mm-hmm.
And their business is constantly bringing in more of these devices, unlike the way a regular person, consumer typically operates. So it's sometimes disingenuous for us to act like we're the best people all the time to tell you what you need. And as much as I want to see the 800 series Pixel exist in the form of the Pixel 5 and maybe not see the Pixel become strictly budget oriented, this might mean more people get their hands on it. This might mean more people can afford it. So who am I? And maybe even me, I will be just fine with the 765G and live my life and not see a huge degradation of performance in my day-to-day. I'm not even playing that many games, doing things that can really stress it out. So where I'm going with this is that this may be the best decision for Pixel to be budget-oriented, mindful, to bring in as many users as possible, to get their software out there to as many users as possible, and to not be cost prohibitive in any of their lineup. And even though for me personally, it's not what I want, I can see why for the marketplace and for the average person, this could be the right thing to do. If that price point matches or lines up where I think it should. If you have a bigger version of the 4A, slightly different specs, bigger battery, 765G, the same pixel camera,
Vanilla
Android, and a decent amount of RAM, and the right price,
Yeah.
that could be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Just putting that out there.